from the quotations of Shinran, a record in Lamentive Divergences, Chapter 1, Paragraph 1. Alive with the inconceivable working of Amida's vow, I shall realize birth in the Pure Land. The moment you entrust yourself to the vow, so that the mindset upon saying the Nembutsu arises within you, you are immediately brought to share in the benefit of being grasped by Amida, never to be abandoned. Namo. Okay, good morning. Do we have Dharma school today?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so.
Well, where are they? Group one?
Okay. Whoever would like to join, Mrs. Sakuma and Mrs. Stephanie, please move on. After I remind us about what Elaine Sensei just mentioned, that aside from this being our, monthly memorial in February, we're also commemorating the person who passed away some 2,600 years ago, who was born as Siddhartha Gautama, and then when he was about 35. 29? That's when he awakened to enlightenment? Yeah, he left his home and then went to seek a way to help people alleviate suffering. And that's when he woke up at age 35 to become a Buddha, awakened one. And then he shared his happiness with others. And that became the religion we call Buddhism. And then at age 90, right? Yeah. Age 90? 80? 80. Oh, Shinran was 90. Okay. All right. That's why we go to school to learn all these facts. But I don't know. But why? But anyway, so at age 80, like any human being, he went through the change we call death. And this is the special day in February that, according to some people, I don't know how they figure out these things, but anyway, so apparently on February 15th, according to what we're told, is when he died. And that's when, as Elaine Sensei mentioned, he realized what we call parinirvana, ultimate spiritual liberation. Because from age 35 to age 80, he continued to live as a mortal, finite human being, but with insight, awareness. So he didn't just live, but he lived with awareness. And then, because of his physical existence, he went through the change that we'll all go through again. But we commemorate that with a special way of reflection on that spiritual legacy that we're the beneficiaries of, and we continue to seek and walk that same path of awakening. And so that's how we share this spirit of appreciation for which this Nirvana Day is commemorated. And so this year, I continue to put up these scenes from the life of Siddhartha or Shakyamuni. And then today, I thought of this other idea of putting the silk scarf around the larger picture we have in the back of the Ondo. And that's part of a Tibetan tradition, a way of expressing respect. And so, I don't know, remember when, there was an occasion we had visitors from a Tibetan tradition and they presented these scarves. So I have a few in the closet here. Make good use of it before it got too faded and carried. Anyway, so that's the thought for Dharma school, to think about why we live. That's what people do think about when they realize that we all die. So then the question becomes, why do we live? It's not just a matter of not dying. We don't live to avoid dying, but we live to, as we can say or feel, to wake up. To wake up. To really, truly appreciate the meaning of having been born into human life, just like we recited in the three treasures. Okay, so that's why we have Dharma school.
Thank you.
Okay. reflections from this book. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. It came out about 25 years ago as I looked in my notes. Yeah. How We Die. It was a bestseller back then, where this physician was talking about reflecting upon this process that as a physician he understood the body goes through in this transition or transformation called death. But it was, to me, a very insightful and spiritually enriching book. And this is what I thought I'd join you this morning as we reflect upon Nirvana Day. This is the idea of spiritual liberation. This is what we refer to as the whole purpose of being born into human life, is to realize this state of nirvana. And does anyone recall what does that word mean? It's a Sanskrit word, nirvana. I know there was a band named Nirvana, but they've since died. But nirvana is a technical Buddhist term, which means nir is a negative prefix, and then vana means grasping, craving, thirst. So it's the alleviation of grasping, unfulfillment, dissatisfaction. Or as my colleague Reverend used to say, a state of monkunashi. Can you ever think of the point in your life where you didn't monku about something? Or can you imagine to be in a state where you're not consumed by complaining, dissatisfaction? And that's what nirvana is. And I think we all seek that sense of being fulfilled, content, truly satisfied, appreciative of our life. That's nirvana. And I think we all seek that. And where and how, that's up to the various traditions that have developed. But in the Buddhist tradition, that is the basic reality we can also appreciate as the Pure Land. Pure of our delusions, pure of our grasping, pure of our obsessive, self-centered attachments, to need something more, to expect something more of others and ourselves. So basically, that sense of nirvana is what we commemorate. And so that's, as Elaine mentioned, is the iconic death scene. Death scene that somewhere along Buddhist history, artists imagined what that scene would look like. And it was depicted in this way of the Siddhartha lying on his side, and according to tradition, his head was pointing north, and he was facing the west. But what's interesting that it was pointed out to me once that was in Indian culture, the usual way that people would lay, dealing with the energy fields. And so when you're not feeling well or something, they would encourage you to take that position to promote healing. And that's why, he was in that position. And that's how that got passed on to different cultures, that, people, in some ways of thinking about it, don't want to lie in that position because they associate it with death. So, how these images, are portrayed and how we project on them. Because, not to be disrespectful, but, I'm thinking in contrast the image of Jesus' death scene, which is what? The crucifixion. The imagery of that. That's pretty heavy duty. Yeah. In contrast, we have this image of a peaceful, content completion of a human life. So, each one has their own impact for whatever reasons those came up with. Why somebody thought that this would be a significant way to represent one's completion of life. But that's what it is. And how we can relate to that is, to each of us to determine, not for any church or any religion or any philosophy or dogma to tell you, but for each of us to sense what these images are trying to convey deep within our own sense of being alive. So this reflection or book by Dr. Newland has a number of quotations that I've taken from it that to me really resonate with what I consider to be a Buddhistic sense of life. So, for example, I think all of us take some comfort if we feel our loved ones who have preceded us in this change called death died peacefully, right? You hear a family say, oh, it was such a relief that my grandma, my son, my wife died peacefully. But Dr. Newland offers, from his experience, as a physician, attending physician of many people's deaths, he says, for too many of us, the manner of death will prove to be beyond control, and no knowledge or wisdom can change them. And when I read that, I recalled how Shinna mentioned something similar, where what the condition or situation was at the end of my life is no concern to me. If I die kicking and screaming, so be it. Because his focus was now, the sense of awakening to his oneness, we call it, with immeasurable life, the sense of Namu Amida Butsu, here and now, will overcome any so-called final moments of the physical death. It's the here and now of awakening that Shinran was focused on or aware of. And that's what I thought, this sense of how we're so consumed about our thoughts, our actions, our condition at the final breath of our life is unrealistic, because we have no control over that. So this is what Dr. Newland was trying to encourage, that we accept that fact. So, what he offers was, for those who die and those who love them, a realistic expectation is the surest path to tranquility. Just be real, accept what it is at that time. And he encouraged the greatest dignity to be found in death is the dignity of the life that preceded it. This is a form of hope we can all achieve, and it is the most abiding of all. Hope resides in the meaning of what our lives have been. So it reminded me of one discussion back in Hawaii amongst the ministers, and one sensei shared, people talk about not being afraid of death. I would rather look at it as not being afraid of life. So this sense of being alive and how we can live it here and now is what gives meaning to our lives. And so that's why, I don't think, even though we talk about being reborn in the Pure Land and so forth, and other traditions talk about going to heaven, those are kind of things in the future. I think our spiritual sense of being can only happen now, as we are. And we add to that gratitude, with gratitude. So this is the meaning of what our lives have been and how we've been able to live to this moment. by virtue of all the causes and conditions that have come together from which we have appeared. And when those conditions change, as they'll inevitably do, we will go through the change of disappearing we call death. And we also have to acknowledge, as in the Pure Land Sutras explain, I am born alone, I die alone, I come alone, I go alone. We are utterly unique, individual, finite beings unto ourselves. And that's why it's so important for us to appreciate that religion is not a group activity. It is not something we do as a community, as a organization, but as an individual, reflective human being, trying to come to terms with the meaning of living as we acknowledge the fact of the change we call dying. And this is how we can think about the affirmation of our life and the whole sense of the uniqueness and realization of that, as Dr. Newland goes on and offers an expression that to me connects with the traditional reading of the epistle that you might be familiar with, that we read at memorial services, titled The White Ashes, written some 600 years ago by the then head of the Monshu, head of the Honganji, and that's the altar to the left of the central altar dedicated to the 8th generation descendant of Shinran, who went by the name of Renyo, and he wrote this classic letter, the epistle that we called On White Ashes. But Dr. Newland's reflection offers something that to me that related to that, resonated with that spirit that Renyo was offering, where Dr. Newland says, hope lies not only in the expectation of cure or even the remission of the present distress. For the dying patients, the hope of cure will always be shown to be ultimately false. Even the hope of relief, too, often turns to ashes. When my time comes, I will seek hope in the knowledge that insofar as possible, I will not be allowed to suffer or to be subjected to needless attempts to maintain my physical life. I will seek it in the certainty that I will not be abandoned to die alone. So as I reflect upon the white ashes, I see this sense of the awakening and meaning that Dr. Newland is encouraging is in the sense of spiritual companionship, is in the sense of being one with immeasurable life of Namo Amida Butsu. So from this, we find a passage of a poem by Shinran in his collection dedicated to the Pure Land Masters called the Koso Wasan, which we read where we chant during the memorial service liturgy. Following the Shoshinge, this is a passage that we conclude the chanting of Shoshinge with, where Shinran celebrated. Of those who encounter the primal vow, not one passes by in vain. They are filled with the treasure ocean of virtues. The defiled waters of their blind passions are not separated from it. This is the promise and assurance of the Honga, primal vow, which we express in the call of Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo